Good afternoon and welcome to the Board of Trustees meeting of the Hayward Area Shoreline Planning Agency. It's December 7th, 2023. We're beginning today at 3:03. And Devin, we can hold their keys.
Yes. Chair Wasserman. Francisco Zermania, City of Hayward.
Presente.
Lou Andrade, alternate Hayward Area Rec and Park Districts.
Here.
And Chair Dennis Wasserman, State Regional Park District.
Here.
Devin Reese, Principal Planner with the State Regional Park District.
All right, we do a roll call of the prospective HASPA trustees.
Yes. Rita Duncan, Orwell Sanitary District.
Present.
And we know that Eric Henshey, Alameda County Mosquito Abatement District, is on his way.
Staff members.
Yes, I'd like to announce that Amanda Sanders, Senior Administrative Specialist with East Bay Regional Park District, is here with us. This is Edwin Willis, Senior Planner with the Park District. From our Technical Advisory Committee. Oh, great.
Oh, you're welcome.
Eric Henshey is joining us from.
I'm sorry.
Traffic. We are joined by Brian Lapsco with Hayward Rec and Park. Thank you, Brian, for the use of the room and the refreshments. Eric Pearson, City of Hayward, Taylor Richard, City of Hayward, and McKenna from the City of Hayward. Robbie Perry is with the Park District, as is Jason Rosenberg, and we have Jenny Dang from the Orwell Sanitary District. Amanda, have I missed anybody? Oh, excuse me, Erica Castillo with Alameda County Mosquito Abatement District.
Great, thank you, Devin. So today's meeting is held pursuant to the Brown Act. Board members and staff are participating in person, with the exception of Rita, who is participating virtually. The public can participate via phone or video conferencing. And our first item today is public comments. So public comments can be submitted in 1 to 2 ways. And Devin, could you explain that to the public?
Yes, the public can comment by sending an email to asanders@edparks.org by 12 o'clock on the day of the meeting. Please identify the agenda number. I don't believe we've had any emails of public comment.
There have been no public comment emails.
Okay, and the second option is to participate live via Zoom. If you'd like to make a live public comment during the meeting, this option is available through the virtual meeting platform. There is a virtual meeting pre-registration link on the agenda, which will have you pre-register for the meeting and then provide you details for the virtual meeting for the purpose of providing public comment. Basically, you would raise your hand once you're in the meeting and you'll be called on. So I don't believe anyone from the public is on just yet, but they may join during the meeting.
Only staff is currently on the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, that's a shame, but thank you for all those ways of participating, and we'll come back to you if you have any questions from the public. We'll move to approval of minutes of the October 26th, 2023 meeting. Are there any comments, questions, corrections? If there are none, may I have a motion to approve? So moved by Trustee Zermania, seconded by Trustee Andrade. Hearing no further discussion, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, hearing none, motion passes unanimously. We'll move to the City of Hayward project updates. Taylor, anything?
Yes, we do have something this time. So on November 6th of 2023, the City of Hayward received a major site plan review application for a new data center. The project site is located south of 92 along Eden Landing Road, Production Avenue, and Investment Boulevard. As proposed, the project would include the demolition of 9 existing 1-story office and industrial buildings, totaling approximately 165,000 square feet, and the development of an approximately 300 square foot 3-story data center that will reach up to 116 feet in height, an approximately 14,000 square foot 1-story data center that is 21 feet in height, and an approximately 15,000 square foot security building, 28 emergency generators arranged in 2 generator yards, and an on-site project substation and PG&E switching station. The site is approximately 11.37 acres and is comprised of 2 parcels. I'm happy to answer any questions or defer them to our project planner, who is Senior Planner Elizabeth Blanton, and I can bring back feedback, or I can share her email. It's on Eden Landing Road, Investment Boulevard and Production Avenue, Scott Free Street frontages. If you guys are familiar with the shopping center that's right down there, it's like got a taco margarita in it, it's right adjacent to that site.
There's 300,000 square feet, you said 300.
Oh, 300,000 square feet.
Very, very big.
Multiple stories.
And multiple stories, it's approximately 116 feet tall, which requires exception in the code.
Has this been approved?
No, it's the first symptom. So,
So,
the project planner is going to bring it for a work session with the planning commission. And staff hasn't provided any formal feedback yet, we just submitted.
So you
oh,
want comments?
Harvey, I'm gonna ask.
You're allowed to bring feedback and I will pass it along to our team.
The only I would say is solar panels and batteries.
Well, well, pardon me, you're done.
Yeah.
That's it, just solar panels and
Okay,
batteries.
Eric, you got anything?
Oh, no.
Mr. Zimmerman?
I have solar panels.
Next.
Rita, anything?
No, there's nothing for me, thank you.
Okay, I guess my only question would be, what does 116 feet look like? Is that anywhere near the shoreline?
Yeah, it'll
10
be,
stories.
yeah, it'll be near the shoreline. It will by far be the tallest building in the area. Currently, the maximum height in the industrial area is 75 feet. So this would be at requesting an over 25-foot deviation.
Yeah.
The code allows it as long as the project provides public amenities that can be used by the public. I'm not entirely sure which ones they're proposing at this point in time.
And are there, what is the tallest building along shoreline at this
Not-
point? 75 is the limit.
How tall is the Alpine facility?
I'm not entirely sure. There
It's close.
What's the tallest building in Hayward? I don't think, the old city hall.
That would probably be the old city hall. The other data center that was recently approved, the Heinz development that is along Clawwinder Drive has a data center. Theirs is about 80 feet tall.
Well, if you have to do public amenities, maybe they should transfer the public amenities to the Hart facility. Over there, because that's public, to the trail or to the
The
Sure.
exception requires that it's like on site
on-site. Okay.
public amenity.
Huh, so if there's any chance, can we get a chance to see where, I don't know where this place is.
Yeah, I can, at the next
there's
meeting, I could provide site plan
Okay,
and
because that'd be really
elevations.
interesting, and I wonder what do 28 generators sound like, do they all go off at the same time, and what do birds do when they try to mate?
Yeah,
Seriously.
it is quite a large portion of the site is hosted by these generators.
There's a good restaurant there, my little shopping center.
Changes my opinion. I'm all for it. No, in all seriousness, I'd love to see, I know are there any noise attenuation studies or anything like that?
It will require an EIR as part of the analysis, so
Okay, good.
that will look into like bird strikes from a building that tall and any environmental impacts, including noise and things like that. I'll bring a site plan
And
and
then-
elevations.
And so you'll bring back that EIR because we'll have, I would assume this group would want to have some input as far as view sheds. I mean, we can't control the birds, but the view sheds from the bay trail and the things we're trying to protect on the shoreline might be impacted, and some of the noise might occur. We might have.
Do you find it beneficial? I can invite the project planner to come and speak more about the project. If this body would like that, I can have her come to the next meeting.
Taylor, would you explain who the lead agency for the EIR is?
I believe the lead agency is the California Energy Commission, because it's considered a small power plant, but the city. The city will be responsible
I, Dennis, this is Rita, I do have a question. When you say that there's, it has to be open, to the public, has to have public amenities. Are they just talking about a restroom? What goes into that category?
How the city of Hayward has interpreted that in the past is like public parks, like trails, basketball courts, like actual amenities that the public could use, not just like restrooms or trash facilities or things like substantial things.
So, cause my question is concerning when would these amenities be open? And the reason I ask that question is, you know, in Ashland, there's the Reach Center for young adults or youth, but it's only open from 8 to 5, and that to me does not really avail except to the public, because a lot of the public works, and many of the students don't get out until maybe 3 o'clock. So when you say open to the public, is it, I guess if we get a presentation, we can ask all of these questions.
Just received, the application, so we don't have all, and the application is currently incomplete, so. Yeah, we will bring it back and I'll bring my senior planner Elizabeth Blanken, and she can answer when, but my understanding is that it would have to be open during usable hours to the public.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, there's no further comments, or there's no public with any comments. That was an informational item, I'm sure. Anything else going on down in Hayward?
Nope, that's the only project.
All right, thank you, Taylor. We'll move now to the JPA agreement update. Yeah, or Dean,
Yeah,
so misprint.
I misspelled my own name. Yeah, thank you, Chair Wasby. So this, this body, HASPA, is really being looked at as a model for climate change adaptation throughout the East Bay by local governments. I wanted to share that. For example, I'm on the steering committee of a group called the Open Alameda Adaptation Committee, which is being run by the city of Alameda. And they are considering forming themselves into a JPA. And I know that other park district staff run similar informal groups that are trying to become more formal, as sea level rise is increasingly seen as a regional problem, not to be solved by individual actors. So I just wanted to put that front and center, that HASPA is really, by its longevity and by what we're trying to do to expand it and create a stronger HASPA, people are looking to us as a model. So with that in mind, I was pleased that at our previous meeting on October 26th, that when the board heard a presentation from our legal counsel about the remaining JPA items that had yet to be negotiated, that the board had a discussion and directed staff to proceed with drafting sections of the JPA agreement that acknowledged the different membership tiers that we created, tiers 1, 2, and 3, and then it also included weighted voting. And that the option for weighted voting was seen as a way, is seen as a way to provide fairness for the larger agencies who contribute more, in this case for dues, to the management and operating the HASPA. So since that meeting, legal counsel from Hanson Bridget have sent the staff a draft completed JPA with these provisions. We just received it the other day. Next week, I'll be sending it to the TAC members, and they'll begin their review and they'll start sharing with their council offices. So the current adoption schedule for the HASPA board to review this draft is going to be the next regular meeting, which we're proposing to be February. And so I just wanted to put that out there. That's sort of my update. And see if there were any questions.
Any questions, comments on the update?
Are we? Well, I mean, are we still considering, are we gonna, are this where we vote on this or what?
Today, no, this was just an informational item. What will happen in February is you'll actually see the draft JPA document itself and all of the provisions that we've been negotiating with the technical advisory group. And that's when those discussions will begin.
Okay, well, I mean, I just want to state right now that we took it back to the board and everything, and we're not satisfied with the way it's weighted. And we think that there should be at least a majority or 3 members, because as it's weighted, the 2 largest members can override anything else, and we think there needs to be at least 1 more vote to because you could encumber funds which we would have no say in. So maybe some modification where when it's encumbering funds we have a supermajority required or something, and that's what is the circuit board. So I just want to state that now.
Okay, would you like staff to bring back an option that has that provision in it?
Yeah, maybe that, or, you know, some variance, some variation of that, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that might satisfy the board.
Okay, so it wasn't that weighted voting itself was the problem, it was the way the weighted voting on certain decisions.
Well, there was anything that would encumber funds or require a bigger contribution, or that was our main concern, because as it's written, you know, you could obligate other board members who may not have those funds, you know, and the two of you, well, the two largest ones, the regional would override. So it's kind of like the, you know, the small state, big state compromise, you know.
Okay, well, yeah, thank you. Brian shared a little of that, but I got some more details from you right now, so that's helpful.
Any other possible modifications that are coming up, or is it more or less what we discussed at our last meeting?
The draft that we received, that we'll share with the technical advisory committee next week, is essentially what you agreed to last meeting. So the 3 tiers, the recommendations of weighted voting along those tiers, the some of the definitions that we had come up with about supporting agency, managing agency. Those were the last provisions. Everything else that you'll see is what was seen by the attorneys back in April or May earlier this year.
The modifications on the fees, with the 3 different tiers, or would they be kept as we discussed last?
We had discussed $130,000 for the annual
Okay.
budget of the whole organization divided into those 3 tiers. So that has not changed.
Okay, all right, and the fee structure to the 3 tiers, that's changed, like I mentioned.
The 3 tiers are still the same, so that smallest agencies are tier 1,
Okay,
the medium-sized agencies are tier 2, and then City of Hayward and the Park District are the largest.
have we heard from Rita and the Oro Loma? She was.
I was going to report, I was waiting for Hart to finish. My board gave me instructions that we could not sign up to something like that, you know, the 19%, not unless, but felt that all of the agencies that had property along the shoreline that there should be some outreach to make sure that they're included and they help cover the cost of the operational cost of us developing whatever, you know, the sea line protection that we're going to develop. They also felt that we needed to model and do some outreach for what they're doing over in the, I guess you call it the West Shore. I think it's called, it goes from what, Daly City to Foster City. They are, I guess, a little bit ahead of the curve than we are. I'm not sure what, my notes are back in California, so I'm sorry. I'm trying to go on memory. But they felt that there should be some outreach, and that they felt that the next maybe 6 months that we should develop some kind of outreach plan to work with some of these agencies to see if we can bring them along. And that we should not bear this by ourselves. That was the overall feedback that I got from the board members. Is that, you know, that the chart that you shared with us at our last meeting, they looked at it and they felt that all of, you know, the state and flood control and all of them should play a part in it. You know, perhaps not, you know, 10 all the meetings, but that they should bear some of the responsibility of the cost.
We do have Jason Rosenberg from our attorney's office who could speak to this if you want to call on him.
Sure, Jason, you have any input?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Jason Rosenberg, East Bay Regional Park District Assistant General Counsel. So the feedback we're getting is productive. It's just a departure from the last set of instructions that staff had from the HASPA board. Today's agenda item is really an update, just letting everyone know that this will be coming back for a future discussion. So if this new information is enough to kind of give maybe a change in direction, I think the best option would be to give staff kind of direction on what more you want to see, and either have it at the February meeting and set this up for a two-part discussion where we can present what we've done to date, and then also present on some of these alternative options. What I heard was the encumbering funds was not okay if it can be done by the voting percentages. So they were looking for maybe a safeguard, maybe. So if when encumbering funds, they want a majority of vote percentages and a majority of voting members to vote in the affirmative. Is that what I heard?
I was looking for some sort of supermajority where you know, when in the legislature you have 2/3 or something like that, or with something over, because right now it's weighted. The 2 members have 50%, you know, over 50%. It's weighted that way, and you can encumber a lot of the small districts, because any future members will probably be smaller districts, I imagine, or smaller things, and we're already smaller. And it's not, I guess the fear is we would be people would encumber the money that, and we have no voice in it. And so so if it's gonna be encumbering money, we want some sort of majority plus one or something like that, at least that.
Okay. We can go back. I mean, if that's the direction of the board as a whole, then we can go back and kind of add that as an additional kind of data point for term sheet. I think what we were going with originally was the direction on the voting percentages. So there's also, just as a reminder, there's always the backstop. I mean, 2 things to keep in mind is everyone here wants to be part of this and recognizes the value in collaboration. And I don't see any member with a larger voting percentage using that as a way to kind of steamroll the others. I think it's just trying to reflect kind of a sense of fairness and equanimity. But I hear your point. So I think I'm not prepared to draft on the fly right now, making these edits. We can take these input and bring it back at the future meeting. So I heard this concept of a supermajority, or as a way to not have the smaller members kind of outvoted by a non-majority voting members. But there's always that backstop of if something happens, you can always leave, that's unilateral. That doesn't require a majority vote of the board. If any members thinks this isn't fair and they're getting a raw deal, you can always just leave unilaterally. That's always there, no matter what. But that being said, I hear what you're relaying from Hard's board. Appreciate that. So we can take that and try to come up with an additional alternative for where we're ready to adopt in February, or if we want to kind of study this further. That's kind of, I guess, the 2 options that I see is delivering something ready to go with like alternative A, alternative B for like in a way that we could adopt in February, or if it requires more discussion, then I would say make that February meeting like more of a introduction, and the study session not prepared to adopt at that meeting. I guess that was some direction I'd look for from the board on how to kind of prepare for the next meeting.
Steve, there may
Let's see, with all of this discussion, and now we're gonna prolong it a little bit longer, are we still able to meet the objectives of HASPA while we are discussing this? Or have our project stopped while we're
Well, the main project of the HASPA staff and technical advisory staff is to create this JPA agreement, grow HASPA, and start on July 1st, 2024, with a new board, a new budget, and basically a new set of operating,
Got it.
principles.
Got it.
So we have some time.
So we have to, okay, got it.
We have time, so I mean, we have till July under the current JPA, so we have time for this. That's partly why we extended it, why we did, so that we can work all these issues out now, which is good. It's good to get these ironed out now instead of after it gets signed. So we have time to do that now, and we're still within the existing JPA.
I would just like to add that, we do have time. The other thing is, I personally don't think we have money. We've gone through this process for a long time. We keep rolling over. We've spent all of our last year's dues on this, every penny of our last year's dues on this. And so now if we're gonna go further and debate some more of these issues, we're gonna incur more of our dues that we could be using it. It's like, correct me if I'm wrong, but our technical advisory representatives that we appointed to do the working in the weeds for us came up with this plan. All of us agreed to it at the last meeting, and now it's fallen apart. So at some point.
We didn't, well, let me make a statement. I did not agree to it. And I shared with you that I needed to go to my board.
Well, I
Because
think we understood we needed to come to our boards, but if the technical advisory committee and the representatives of each agency tended to agree together in concept, we all understand we can't act unless we go to our boards. But my only point is, I mean, we can go on, but I would vote against spending any more money on any attorneys when we're trying to save the shoreline, not, pardon me, Jason, ingratiate attorneys.
Good point.
I just, at some point, if it's not worth it, maybe it's not worth it. But I'd be interested to hear everybody else's opinion on also.
Well, I don't know what to say. I mean, both Rita and I have boards to deal with, and we've been involved with HASPA since the beginning, and we'd like to stay with it. But I mean, as far as I understood, is our first opportunity to respond to the percentages, so that's what we did. But I understand you're concerned about, like wasting time, but I mean, as I said, I understood this was our first opportunity to kind of comment after the meeting with the board, and hopefully that's all it's going to take,
Oh, and I agree with you. I think that is, I mean, ultimately, it's a board decision.
Yeah.
It's just all the work that's been done.
Yeah, well,
And my only statement is, I'm all in favor of rehashing this up, but if we can do it at this level and not involve attorneys unless we add a sentence or delete the part that says the percentages.
I don't have an example of exactly what a supermajority would be, but I think there's some sort of reasonable, I mean, maybe +1 or something, I don't know. I mean, one of the, plus one more board member or one more board. To agree with anything it's got physical implications, think about what you're right.
Yeah, just an example, the JPA has weighted voting, but there are certain decisions that are called out as requiring unanimity, or you could do requiring supermajority for those topics that were deemed sensitive that everyone wanted equal input to. So for day-to-day decision making, it's weighted voting, but there are some call outs. So that's an example.
Well, my only request would be, or my proposal would be, can we handle it at attack level? I mean, it seems like there's a lot of intelligence. Attack people are smart. They hash this whole thing out. Could you turn on a dime or turn on a nickel? Literally, and then work this out and then make another proposal. But the same thing is, if you want to equal vote, can you kind of scout it out with your agencies whether or not you're willing to pay the freight? Or do you still want the tiered deal and with all the benefits of equal voting? Because that's what it comes down to. I mean, I know you get two senators, a good smallest state in the world, if that was a couple
I
hundred.
just said, okay, just when it comes out to encumbering funds, then it would be required a little bit more than just two members, you know, and a weighted majority plus one, or, you know, plus something. But you're. It would just be like, you know, like in a bond or something, you need 2/3 vote or something, it's, you know, and be something like that. I mean. 51%.
Have we in the past come up with decisions or projects that really have been expensive? So I think that we're probably dealing with a possible project that may not even come to us, where we would have to spend a lot of funds.
Well, I mean, you know, maybe something where we want to raise our fees, for example, we want to raise our contributions, for example, we can remember in the future. Yeah, and I don't know, but I mean, I think the district wanted to have an option where they could stay in but not increase their commitment. I don't know, you know.
So I suppose that decision would need to be made in July, which we would want to finish.
Yeah.
So at that time, I suppose.
And of course, we could leave anytime, I suppose, but I mean, I'm just saying that.
Yeah.
I mean, something short of having to
Yeah.
leave, you know.
Well, I think we're all here because we're really worried about the sea level rise.
Right.
We all want to stay here.
Yeah.
Every 100%. So we need to speak with our boards and let them know, hey, this is serious business. Or, you know, this is not the toy time, right? This is life or death in certain situations.
I mean, I guess the thing would be like, you know, if there was a grant where you have to match with a contribution and so it would be, say, 50-50, you know, and then it was, and it's a big grant, but it would, then the question is, you know, do you really want to spend money for something? Do we have the money to do that, and can we handle that? And even if the state were to manage the rest of it, you know, so maybe some of the bigger members can handle that, but the smaller members couldn't. So that was the question, you know, we still wanted to have a voice at the table, but rather than just leaving, but I'm just saying,
Well, I mean, I think that's a very legitimate question, and obviously, if if we had to match 5 million, obviously, none of the smaller agencies, or even
yeah,
probably, well, except Central Parks, we could do it, but. The question would be, and in my opinion, it would be, does Oraloma or the others, or the mosquito abatement district, what if we're going to build a project, or we get a grant to rebuild the Hayward Interpretive Center?
Mhm.
And it was a $5 million match, I would bet you would vote for that. I mean, I'm just conjecturing because it
well,
benefits.
I guess it would.
Okay, so and I'm not going to put a deal on it, I'm just trying to make a point. If it was a $10 million project for the regional park district and you were required to put in 5, of course you'd vote no. And if you got overruled, I don't think we blame you for backing out of the deal. I think we'd also understand as the largest agency, we can't expect you to do the Hayward Marsh for us.
Yeah.
If we get and you come up, we don't expect you to come up with $1 million to get our marsh. I'd like to think of us as all one big agency, but it's understandable what we're talking about here. So, I mean, you always have that option, in my opinion. That was always the fallout. I mean, I don't think we're gonna get million, we were probably gonna get some from the Santa Fe Restoration Authority. What was that? Measure A. We'll probably get some good money from that, and I don't think they have a whole lot of match stuff. I could be wrong, but the point is, the real question is, it's got to be a decision, because depending upon how much weight you want, and depending upon how much dues you want to pay, and what the relationship to those two things are, we're not talking about millions of dollars, but we are talking about on July 1st, we would go from $36,000 budget, correct me if I'm wrong, to $130,000 budget split 5 ways. So that would be, somebody help me with that. That's $26,000 a piece. So you're almost doubling down in your commitment, and that would be the question I would have, because nothing's going to come up in the first year or two.
Right.
But there will be July 1st, there will be a bill for membership here.
Yeah, which I think we understood we were willing to pay, but I guess they didn't want to encumber future. They wanted to control their budget essentially, and I don't know. I mean, I understand that we could pull out any time, but They're just concerned that there would be encumbrances that they couldn't, they would be obligated to, and they didn't have to vote to, make a voice to it, that's all. And I can't imagine what encumbrances those would be, but I mean, that matches the one example I thought of, but I mean, like some other encumbrances.
No, that's exactly what would happen. I mean, with a big match like that, which we'd be blessed to get, but
Yeah.
problem would be how do we,
Yeah.
how do we split it amongst ourselves? But we would have the same debate we're having now.
Yeah.
So.
So
And,
maybe,
and my question, my board question is, they felt that there should be a lot more effort of getting more players at the table. You know, more people that are involved that have, you know, an invested interest in Sea Rise, to be a part of this. So which would, you know, lower the amount that we have to contribute. They felt that, you know, the five organizations that's represented, we should do some outreach to try to bring them as part of the JPA, that they should have a vested interest. That was their basic issue around it. You know, they understand the weighting as far as it relates to your, you know, your vote. But they felt that we should not be doing the heavy lifting for some of the other agencies that should be involved, that our focus should be on trying to recruit them and develop some kind of outreach plan for us, you know, or Loma and Hard, for all of us, to try to get more individuals, not individuals, I'm sorry, organizations that have an invested interest in sea rise along the shore, the state of California, the flood control. They felt that they should be part of it, that we are not looking at the total picture.
Well, yeah, I tend to agree with you 100% on that one, and I think that's one of the focuses in the coming year is to, an ongoing focus is to get more members, and I think we've been worked on that for, it's been 6 months, it's been over a year, how's that? We try like crazy, and at some point, let's face it, it's, I don't know why Alameda County and the flood control is not involved, that's crazy, but we, you and your board, especially your board who's so well connected politically, we need to lobby members of the Board of Supervisors and suggest, hey, your staff is being resistant to something that we tend to all agree on. It's coming, it's happening, we know it's happening. Don't you feel any obligation to be at least part of our organization? And for them, it's I mean, I don't know how they would cut it. It wouldn't be, you know, a percentage of the Alameda County budget. It would be obviously a portion of probably the flood control budget, but still it would be nothing to be a member of this and be an active member of this.
Right.
So I think it's incumbent upon us to continue, but I mean, it's well, in my opinion, it's our number one priority. We're not gonna be doing any giant projects in the next couple of years. We're trying to get on our feet here at $130,000, get organized, get new members, and show our beautiful master plan. The one thing about this agency is we've got a great master plan that was paid for by somebody else, by grants. So I think we've got to, you know, we got a shovel ready stuff. Well, not shovel ready, but we've got a master plan. And we could go ahead if we had the ability to move forward and start doing lobbying for some of these projects. We're not going to build anything. We're not going to.
So can I follow up with that? So what do you need from us? What materials do we have to meet with the Board of Supervisors? We as a group can get on their calendar to present, to tell them what we're doing, and not.
I think it's going to be, somebody's going to have to say, we don't get cooperation from flood control. I don't know that my supervisor, Nate Miley, knows that. I'm happy to go and talk to him. I mean, it's Christmas or it's holiday season. I know one of my friends on the hard board was lobbying Lena Tam like crazy last night at the Democratic deal holiday party. This is the time to do it. Formally talk to him and say, hey, listen, you're my friend, I support you. Why won't you support something as good as this?
I mentioned it to Nate myself.
Yeah, if the answer is your staff doesn't find interest in it, I would say you need to get a new staff member or whatever. I mean, we all lobby people, we all go and we do
Basically, it
political
involves
things.
persistence.
Yeah.
And a comment, you know, basically, and every chance you get to talk to staff or board members, oh, by the way, how's that flood control thing where you mention it each time, even if you don't have an hour with them, you just kind of mention it each time. The persistence is what does it. I mean, it's one of the things, and every different format.
I am willing to go before the board of trustees, I mean, the board of supervisors,
Yeah.
at a meeting and tell them publicly, we invite you, can you get into this, let your staff get your staff involved. If anybody wants to come with me, hey, I think that'd be the most effective way to do it.
I do too, as a group.
The entire, and Rita, I think you've come up with the best example in my opinion, when you say we need to do outreach, and not only outreach to the public, but we tried this. Francisco was kind enough to give us a booth at the Hayward Festival, street festivals. Devin and staff we were all out there describing. We've got some great graphics. We've got a compelling argument. Yeah, it's a positive deal. So if we, in this new $130,000 budget, I think it's included with the outreach, I'm talking about really making a presentation. So all of us go to a board of supervisors meeting, give a 5-minute presentation, video clip, say, this is what we're looking at, this is what we're asking, we'd like you to join. And just lobby with the people that are important. And we can do that with every agency.
And we need to tell them how to be.
But see, to me, this is what we should be doing, and it does not, the attorneys don't have to be involved. It's not going to cost them any money. And I don't think we should just be lobbying for flood control. I think that we should have an outreach plan for all of the other agencies that have property along the shore, and that we should have some talking points and a plan. Because how it is right now, I don't think my board will sign up for the JPA in July.
Oh, well, okay, then we need to deal with that. I mean, I think it's very clear what we need to do. And I only see our supervisor simply, kind of stop. But
I'd like you to give us direction to look at these issues and incorporate this into the JPA adoption proposal we're gonna make in February. Just want to make sure that's something we can to work on.
That was gonna be the other point, that we don't keep talking about it. The legal counsel has heard their concern, Hart's concern, and there may be some other possible little line that we look at. And let's put a team together. Let's come up with something.
Yes.
When we're gonna visit these folks. And meet on Tuesdays.
The engagement plan, exactly.
And I think for me, I would get my board involved. Not just me. I mean, you can come with us. Because it's really important. Otherwise, I wouldn't be attending these meetings. I'll be very honest.
See if Jason had any last comments.
yeah, Jason, I have a question before, if you have any last comments, but my first question is, do you, from what you're hearing from us, that we would like to sort of go back to the drawing board, try to figure something out that would be palatable. Do we need to incur legal fees for that, or can the TAC pull it up and throw it to you? And
so, thank you. I think we can do it with minimal legal expense at this point. We have a JPA that's pretty close. I still haven't had a chance to do my review. Fortunately or unfortunately, I am a sunk cost, so my work is not at a billing rate because I'm in-house, so I can do a review of this. Just so to let the board members know, the way it's structured right now is the baseline vote is majority vote. That's how it's going to happen. One member, one vote. Anybody can request a call for weighted voting. It has to be done before the motion is made, and that's a weighted vote. So with that current structure, what I'm hearing is one option is to just specify a threshold when someone cannot call for weighted voting, and then it just still stays at majority vote. I mean, I think that's a very simple solution to addressing that. I do think I would like to spend some time with the TAC to kind of hash out what that could be that would kind of be weighted voting proof. But it does get back to some of the same issues we're talking about. What I would propose is we meet with the TAC. If we can't come up with one solution, we'll just kind of give options to the board so they can kind of digest it and work through it at the meeting. Rita, I'd like to kind of talk to you or have staff talk to you offline to understand what Oraloma's concerns are in a little more detail, to see if they can get accommodated. But there are some safeguards in here already. I mean, right now, adding a new funding obligation on the parties requires all the other member agencies to approve it. So, you know, the voting that would be weighted would be adopting the budget every year. And that is consistent with the weighting of the fees. So if something outside of that happens, there's a new funding obligation and someone doesn't like it, it has to go back to the board. So there's some safeguards there, but I give you that to let you know there are some safeguards in place, but we can kind of go back and dig into that a little more at the TAC level and come up with something with this direction for the next HASPA board meeting, that we can present the entire JPA and some kind of alternatives so that if you want to talk it out more, we can, or if you're ready to take action, that's a possibility too. I think Chair Waspy, you know, yes, we're going back to the drawing board, but we're not erasing the drawing board. There's a lot up there already. I don't think it's going to take a lot of tweaking. I think we're pretty close, is what I want to kind of reassure the parties.
Maybe it's just a language thing where it's not clear to stand out, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe that's what it needs to stand out, because I would, that's my understanding was everything was that the two major players control everything, and so the encumbrance was the issue that was brought up, and I didn't you know, review it carefully, but if you can kind of highlight whatever safeguard that is.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good comments received. We can do that. I think it's all, you know, these are all legitimate comments that we can kind of, you know, we're doing the work now that hopefully will create a really sustainable
It sounds like
that we can go and take to other public agencies in the area to say, look, we have an agency that's adopted, that's in place, please join us. I think, but the first step is we have to be all on the same page so that we can go out and lobby and market this. We have to get it kind of signed first, I think, is the first step. So with that in mind, I can work with Devin to kind of take this direction to the next step.
Thank you, Jason.
I have a question.
Oh, sorry.
The question for city staff. Measure B. Are Measure B funds only for members member agencies of stopways.org?
Yes.
Oh, so Oraloma doesn't get any Measure B funds.
Oh, yeah.
No, they're a member.
Well, they could, you know, they could use Measure B funds for this.
The Measure D funds have to be spent on anything that diverts material from the landfill. So it's gotta be recycling related.
So really, so HASPA is not recycling related? That's stretching it.
Sort of, yeah.
It's climate change, Mother Earth.
Ecological emission.
You get Mr. D funds?
no.
No? Okay, well,
Well, I don't know, would it be recycling, maybe.
No.
Recycling.
okay. I'm looking for solutions.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make one comment related to the state joining HASPA, related to Rita's comment. When we did our initial outreach, many of those state agencies did not want to join the formal bill of HASPA because they are funding agencies, which means that they'd have a conflict of interest and they couldn't award us grant money, like Fish and Wildlife, Caltrans and stuff. A lot of them are Caltrans on the TAC, and we could include them in the technical advisory committee, but I would say we should refrain from keeping them on the actual HASPA board, so we have as many funders as possible.
Excellent idea. Yeah. Excellent.
Well, I have a question. How many miles of the shoreline is this belongs to the state?
Of the Hayward shoreline or of the entire?
That Hayward, I mean, my understanding, they have about 9 miles? From the chart that Devin shared with us at the last meeting?
They own land south of 92, which is in their own like California Coastal Commission program for sea level rise. The Hayward area, which is between like Oraloma and north of 92, I don't know how much they
No, they
occupy.
Highland also.
State Land Commission.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
So Eden Landing is state owned?
correct.
Okay.
Might be federally owned, but state.
Operates-
Yeah.
And just to clarify, Rita, the map you were mentioning, we produced. It only shows the area just as Taylor was mentioning, basically from Orloma Marsh to the bridge. So in that case, the state of California just has a minuscule amount of about 80 acres, but there's many more hundreds of acres south of the bridge that is the Eden Landing area. And that may be what you were thinking of.
Oh, I thought your, one of your charts showed the number of miles. As I said, I don't have it in front of me, but thank you for that information. But nevertheless, I think that we need to really do some outreach to, solicit more participation. Thank you. And I'll be happy to follow up with the attorney on clarifying the Orloma's board's concerns if it doesn't cost us any more money.
Right, well, great, thank you, Jason, very much for your input.
Thank you.
There's nothing further, we'll move to the item number 4, the adoption of the 2024 HASPA calendar. Before you in your notes, we have the agenda schedule or meeting schedule listed as February 8th, April 11th, July 11th, October 10th or 14th. I'm not sure if we're going to discuss that option of October 10th or November 14th tonight, but does anybody have any problem with those dates? By any of those dates?
I guess staff would like a choice of October or November. So that we have a full calendar that we can produce.
Okay, does any, well, first off, the first 3 work for everybody?
Sure.
Great, okay. Rita?
No issues.
Okay, great. And then, so is there any, would anybody have a better feeling about October or November?
October.
Francisco would like October. Does anybody else think October is good?
Things get crammed up at the end of the year, so yeah, October's.
Yeah, okay, October 10th, then that the proposed schedule, and with October is the final meeting of the year.
Okay, so we do need a motion to approve.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve?
So
A motion by trustee Zermania, second by trustee Andrade.
I'll say.
All right, thank you. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, hearing none, motion passes. Thank you very much. Now we are gonna have a great presentation on algal blooms in the SFA.
You're going to move number 6, the presentation first. If you would move that.
Dr. Quack,
Yeah.
excellent. Okay, we'll move to the presentation, the first successful nesting of black oyster catchers among endangered California least terns along the west coast of North America, the Hayward shoreline. Dave Ritchie, introduce yourself, Dave. You can do it better than all of us.
Well, hello. It's an honor to be here today to talk to the Board of Trustees. I'm Dave Ritchie, wildlife biologist, certified wildlife biologist at East Bay Parks. Had the pleasure of working with this agency for 35 years and have touched everything from an endangered fairy shrimp to a gray whale. And today's exciting talk is going to be near and dear to my heart. It's related to several listed species. Without any further ado, I'll share my screen and we'll get started talking about a rare and an interesting bird, the black oyster catcher. So from the beginning, I hope you can see my screen. Give me a thumbs up if you can, if you can hear me well.
Great.
All righty, so here we go. This is the first documented occurrence of the black oyster catcher nesting successfully and fledgling young with 3 listed species. When I'm speaking of listed species, I'm talking about the endangered California least tern that's been on the endangered species list for over 50 years. These lovely birds behind me in the screenshot are western snowy plover and a species of special concern, the black skimmer. I'll share with you some data about the diet of the black oyster catcher. It's a misnomer, and the black oyster catcher does not eat oysters. So we'll find in the talk what it does eat. And this information, which is really site specific and unique to the Hayward shoreline, unique to the East Bay, and unique to the Western North America, is really going to inform recovery efforts, federal recovery efforts directed at the least tern and the western snowy plover. So with that, I'll get going and I'll take comments and questions at the end. First of all our work is related to working in teams and cooperatively with other agencies. And this work would not have been possible without the partnership of 2 of my colleagues. Mr. Ben Pearl, when we started this work in 2022, was employed by the San Francisco Bay Bird Observatory. He was their director of snowy plover and tern research, where he has worked for 9 years now. Ben is with H.T. Harvey as a senior ecologist. Of course, Susan Ramos is no stranger to the East Bay Parks. She's worked as a naturalist for over 20 years. She was acting as a wildlife biologist in the summer of 2022. Quite interesting because she's really focuses on marine ecology and played a key role in the diet work. So the Hayward shoreline is an amazing place, and I could speak hours on the beauty and wonder of this location and its significance to California and to wildlife in general. But the island I'm speaking on, the Hayward shoreline, Island 5, affectionately known as Tern Town, was built with the hearts and minds of more than 7,000 volunteers that started this work in 2000. And today, this colony is the 2nd largest colony of least terns in the western part of the species range. And more than 41,000 hours of work have been donated to help these listed birds, least tern, and of course, highest density of western snowy plovers nesting in Recovery Unit 3, which is focused on Monterey Bay and the San Francisco Bay. Once again, a lot of players in this game. More than 16 different grant and funding agencies have helped to become least tern habitat helpers. Everybody from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service all the way down to Wildlife Innovations have played a key role. It's a real puzzle of efforts to make this site a success. So let's talk a little bit about the black oyster catcher now. You notice this bird has a beautiful red, heavy chisel-shaped bill for cracking into the shells, not of oysters, but of mussels and clams. It's a dark bird. It's a black plumage bird. It's about the size of a crow or raven. This is a special status bird. It's a large black shorebird. Its special status in our country, the United States, as well as Canada and Mexico, due to the small population size. One of the things I'm going to say to you today is that the black oyster catcher is really the barometer of our marine environment, especially our rocky intertidal. And worldwide, there's about 10,000 breeding birds. So it's highly restricted to the rocky intertidal. And it's very vulnerable to nest destruction by predators, native or non-native, and certainly oil spills can have an impact on this bird. This bird, as mentioned, is uncommon along our west coast. It's only found on the rocky intertidal. And of the 6 birds or shorebirds that use the rocky intertidal, and you're thinking maybe if you're a bird watcher, the ruddy turnstone or black turnstone, maybe the wandering tattler, possibly the rock surf bird. This is the only one that spends its entire year in this rocky riprap environment. The other 6 members of that group are there just for the winter season, sort of on a winter resort. To belabor the point, this bird is completely dependent on our rocky intertidal shoreline, which is heavily impacted by human activities, especially along our coast. Certainly Sea level rise is going to be a threat for this bird, climate change. But as I said in my introductory notes, this animal focuses on marine mussels, bay mussels, sea mussels, and clams. They take oysters, excuse me, the oyster catcher, here I am talking about oysters. The oyster catcher takes mussels that are about 1.5 to 2 inches in length, and that's what it forages on. The mussels are closed. When the waves hit them, the mussels open up like my hands are just doing, and the oyster catcher shoots its bill in there and grabs a hold of the mussel. All right, so nesting habitat of this bird is highly limited. It's really only found on the rocky intertidal, and that certainly will be the test question at the end, where they found rocky intertidal. But they're like a gradual sloping beach, much like this image behind me, gradual sloping sandy beach, and that'll be important when I show you the tern colony itself. And here's the real driver. You look at that bill of the oyster catcher, and the oyster catcher has been known to protect its young by using that heavy bill and jabbing at other birds' chicks that get too close to protect them, to protect their young. And they have been known to nest with gulls, and gull chicks will get hit with that bill, and certainly the gull chicks don't do too well after being hit by that bill. And in rare occasions, they've actually nested with Arctic terns, which we don't have in our area. But that certainly was a driver, and that's why that picture is really bold there, is to really highlight the point that this could be a threat to listed birds. We know that paired birds, oyster catchers, mate for life. They are long-lived, and they return to the same location year after year. So when we first detected them in 2022, last year, we knew they were going to be around, and we needed to know what the interactions were going to be with the least terns, the snowy plovers, and black skimmers at the Hayward shoreline. So a little bit about the California least tern. This is the angel of the tern world. It hovers real high in the air, dives with its face straight into the water, pierces fish with that yellow bill, and then returns back to the nest site, usually in sand and oyster shells, and feeds its young. And that's what that image is showing you right there. The victory, a parent tern is feeding a baby tern while the other parent is brooding the young. Now, this is the smallest tern in North America. It was listed as a federal endangered species in 1970. Of the original 20 that were first listed under that land-breaking legislation, the Endangered Species Act, which included the bald eagle, the peregrine falcon, the brown pelican, this one is still on the list. So it's been around for quite a while and needs a lot of help to get off that list. They're migratory birds. They extend all the way from Baja all the way up to the northern part of its range, which is the San Francisco Bay. Next on the special list of birds is this beautiful sandy-backed little plover with the white belly and the incomplete breastband. This is our friend, the western snowy plover, and it's been federally listed since 2012 due to a loss of habitat, certainly a whole host of threats, but this bird nests at Hayward as well. And its population extends all the way along the coast from Washington down to Baja, California. And then lastly, this is an elegant bird. If you never had a chance to get out and go bird watching, this would be a life bird you'd want to see. They have long, dark wings. They've got that beautiful two-tone colored bill. If you notice closely in the image where my pointer is, the lower jaw is longer than the upper jaw, almost 2/3 longer, or at least. And what it does is it drags that larger lower bill through the water, catching fish, and they have long, graceful flight. It looks like just poetry in motion when they're in the air. But this bird is a species of special concern as well. You know, it's found in San Diego, and here we are in California, in the San Francisco Bay, at the northernmost limit of its range. And what's impacting it? Loss of nesting habitat, erosion of islands where it's found. So what are the study objectives? Okay, as when we're doing science, we always want to inform decision makers. And what were the objectives of our work? We want to support the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Recovery Plan for both the California least tern and the western snowy plover. And certainly the district is leading that charge in managing and monitoring breeding habitat. Undertake scientific investigation. We're doing research really to maximize or improve the survival of listed birds like the snowy plover and the least tern and the black skimmer. And then lastly, we got to document. If we don't document, it didn't happen, and we need to learn and keep moving conservation forward. So we wanted to document what was going on with the black oyster catcher in association with 3 of those endangered, threatened, and species of special concern birds, the California least tern and snowy plover and black skimmer, and then identify any protection needs or new management activities that are going to need to happen to help these birds recover from the endangered species list. So I know, being the Board of Trustees, you know where the Hayward Regional Shoreline is intimately, but LET in the screen here stands for LET. That's a 4-letter code for birds. That is the 2nd largest colony north of Ventura County. The largest, of course, is Alameda Point at the former Naval Air Base. So we call this place Turntown. It's operated and managed by East Bay Regional Park District, a special district of Alameda Contra Costa County, the largest urban park district in the nation. And as I may have failed to mention, this has the highest breeding density of California least terns on the West Coast. So it's quite a significant location at almost 280 nests per hectare, and a hectare is 2.5 acres. So a little bit more about the significance of the Hayward shoreline, something we all can be proud of, and why this resource needs to be protected and managed into the future. Our friend the California least tern, after the island was created in 2005, we had our first nesting. Since that time, we've had over 1,400 California least terns, breeding pairs at the site, and the birds, not we, the birds have produced 1,400 fledglings. That means 1 pair of birds makes 1 fledgling. The state average, it takes 5 pairs of least terns to make 1. So the significance of this site is really helping the birds to recover along the West Coast, certainly on California. Secondly, it's our friend the snowy plover. At another time, we can talk about the relationship between snowy plovers and least terns. But since they started nesting, we've had over 56 snowy plover nests at 78 fledglings. And here again, sort of the state average, it takes 2 pairs of snowy plovers to make 1 fledgling, and we're still doing 1 pair making 1 fledgling. So quite again, a significant breeding population. And lastly, the beautiful and elegant black skimmer. We've had 69 nests, 97 fledglings, well above what the state average is. So significant site, and now we have an oyster catcher there. What's going to happen? So here we have the black oyster catcher, a nice adult there in the screen. I hope you can see my pointer. You see a little baby, you see some little mussels they've consumed on. And we really wanted to look at the reproductive success of this bird. And what we're getting at there is, how many eggs are they laying? What percentage of the eggs are hatching? If we have 2 eggs out there, it's 1 hatching, we got 50% hatching success. And then how many fledglings are they producing? That's really important. And when you're managing wildlife, is to have recruitment, new animals coming into the area. And that's done by permitted biologists, myself, walking out there and marking all the nests. And then we wanted to look at what they're eating, and drop bivalves, as I may have failed to mention. They are mollusks, they're clams and oysters. Bivalve means 2 shells. You can see my hands, they separate apart. All right, so here in 2022, quite a significant happening. You can see the coffee spoon there, and you can see 2 oyster catcher eggs. You can see this terracotta pipe that was cut by our plumbers to make chick shelters. So it's an artificial way to protect least tern babies from being eaten. But the oyster catchers decided, hey, we're going to nest next to this terracotta pipe. It kind of looks like rocky riprap, so let's use it. We got a nice broad sandy slope. And in June 6 of 2022, they laid 2 eggs and hatched 1 chick and ultimately 1 fledgling. And on the left side of your screen, you can see the map of all the nesting birds. I'm not going to go into all that today, except to say that the pink color on your screen are all the least tern nests. And now you see on the eastern edge, on the far corner, on the broad flat slope, is where the oyster catcher is set up. And as you may recall, we were interested, are they going to peck any least turn chicks? Are they going to peck any skimmers? Or what's going to happen if they get really close to a snowy plover? And we saw no evidence of an oyster catcher jabbing its bill or threatening any of the listed birds. So here I'm getting into a little technology here, but I'm hoping it works. Your orange circle, or it's not your orange circle, your orange hexagon, six-sided, is for the California least tern. The black circle is for your black skimmer, excuse me, and then your purple square is the oyster catcher. And what I want to show you graphically here is that the least tern started showing up. The snowy plover started showing up to nest, and then the oyster catcher showed up. So the oyster catcher was a late player to the game in 2022. So let's hope it works. Seems like, oh, it is working. Great. And now comes the oyster catcher on the corner. See, in 2000, the terns were already there, setting up reproductive shot, the snowy plovers, and then the skimmers showed up. So the terns were not affected by the late arrival of oyster catcher that year. Now let's fast forward to this year, 2023. The skimmers had such great success. They thought, hey, we raised one, let's lay 3 eggs right in the same spot, different angle. It's kind of interesting how they lay them up in a nice literal line. They established a nest early. They actually started, you'll see graphically, a little bit before the least turns, towards the end of May, and they ultimately produced one fledgling. And you can look at the map here. Last year, we had 144 least turn nests on that island. And here again, I want to draw, I hope you can see my pointer here, but you can see least turns here. You can see, now you'll see the oyster catcher right there. So they are nesting really close to the least turns. And once again, we saw no evidence of a oyster catcher jabbing its bill, a tern or plover chick that got too close. And just again, to show you this graphically, you'll see the oyster catchers show up, and then the round circles are all the black skimmers. So the skimmers and the oyster catchers are setting up shop, and then all the terns and plovers are starting to reproduce. And here we go. So the oyster catchers are already there, and now the terns are starting to show up, and you'll notice how the terns get even closer and closer to the oyster catcher. Okay, so lastly, one of the things here with the diet, because the oyster catchers are flying back and forth. Recall from my early comments that they're basically the size of a crow or raven. And when a snowy plover or a least tern sees a crow or raven, they think a predator, something's going to threaten their nest. But this oyster catcher is dark, but it's got this really long bill. And so every time they departed to get food, there could be some sort of a distraction display or potential threat. And you'll see that the diet of the oyster catcher really showed that they're focusing a lot on clams, they're focusing a lot on mussels, but they're not eating any oysters. And you can see here, this is where they bring, on the lower part of your screen, this is where they bring whole mussels, whole clams back into the colony, crack open the shell, then feed their baby that food item. So they're having to ferry this from the rocky intertidal, the riprap of the Bay Trail, back to the island. And you can see this is a really sort of a Mother's Day, Father's Day kind of a picture. You've got a nice oyster catcher parent here with a teenager walking along, and then you got a little baby oyster catcher here on the red, oops, let me back up, in the red circle. So as I was going to say here, they are carrying food 300 to 800 yards back from the breakwater to feed their young. So every time they take off, there could be a potential threat to the least terns or plovers, and they may want to depart. They may want to leave the area, but we saw nothing like that. I want to show you the departure route of the oyster catcher next. So here is Tern Island. That orange little dot is supposed to be an oyster catcher leaving. You can see the Bay Trail. I hope you follow my pointer in green all the way out. There's rock riprap here, and of course over in the Cogswell Marsh. So the oyster catcher, watch it fly, will take off, goes all the way back out, picks up a clam or mussel, and comes all the way back to feed their young. And once again, the terns and plovers did not depart the site every time those birds left. So in sort of discussion here, I've said that they're a fairly common resident breeding on the outer Pacific coast, but there's very few locations in Alameda or Contra Costa where they actually nest. And in our publication, which I think was attached to your packet, you could read more about that. But there seems to be some evidence where they're expanding their range in British Columbia, possibly in the San Francisco Bay. And this is really thought or hypothesized that this is related to climate change, sea level rise. They're losing spots, so they're moving inland to find new nesting locations. Similar bird to similar species, the European black oyster catcher, and the literature shows that they have a tendency, young birds, to return to the general location of where they were raised. So we think our pair may have originally originated from a pair of birds that was nesting near Eden Landing. And they said they will return to the same site year after year and will remain together pretty much throughout their life. I mentioned that they feed on wave-washed oysters and that the parents will pull mussels or clams off the rock riprap, fly back and feed their young. And at this site at Hayward, they're feeding on a lot of Japanese little neck clams, which is a non-native clan released in the ballast of ships that's established itself in the bay. Excuse me. The rib mussel and the bentnose crab are native clams. So in summary, I really want you to draw your eyes to the lower part of your screen here. You see a family of oyster catchers walking around with a little teenager about to fledge. And in the far left side of your screen, you see this white bird with a black forehead, an incomplete band. And it's kind of brooding, like it's breeding too young. So while they nest near terns and gulls, Arctic terns, sometimes 9 feet away, this was the first documented occurrence of them ever nesting with California least terns, snowy plovers, and black skimmers. And we saw no evidence of them jabbing their bill at a listed bird species. And now you can see the circle. There's a papa snowy plover brooding 2 chicks, and they're getting along, cooperating just fine. So the information on the oyster catcher, nesting near least terns and plovers and skimmers is going to assist in recovery efforts of those listed birds. And certainly we'll be looking at how this plays out in the world of climate change and sea level rise. As I said, if you need some nice bedtime scientific reading to put yourself to sleep, you can read that publication I wrote and my colleagues, and that'll help you, give you more information about the oyster catchers. So the future of birds is really in all of our hands. We're all working together to enhance wildlife and humanity in the San Francisco Bay in the face of climate change and sea level rise. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Always amazing, Dave. Thank you. Any questions, comments?
It looks like we need more islands, planning more islands.
Well, yeah.
Very good.
Thank you so much, Dave. This is a great example. You know, we can sit here and quibble over how much it's going to cost to run this organization and all the stuff, all the trivial stuff that humans talk about. It's some pretty cool stuff we're doing down here at the shoreline. It definitely needs preserving. And definitely need more people like Dave taking care of all these populations. So thank you very much. Good to see
Honored
you.
to be here, Director Waspy. I look forward to seeing you out in the trail. And if anybody ever wants to come out and see the Hayward shoreline, I'd be happy to get you nose to beak to some of these listed birds. Thanks for the opportunity to talk today and have a great meeting.
Great field trip. Thank you very much. We'll move now to the presentation of algal blooms in SFA.
Right, that was a tough act to follow. But I will see what I can do. Okay, let me share the screen. All right, well, thank you, Chair Waspy and members of the trustees, I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about what's going on with the wastewater community along the Hayward shoreline and how we're working to address and prevent future algal blooms in the bay. So I'm Jackie Zipkin. I'm the general manager of the East Bay Dischargers Authority, which is also a joint powers authority of 5 wastewater agencies along the East Bay shoreline. I also serve in that role as an executive board member of the Bay Area Clean Water Agencies, which is all of the wastewater agencies around the Bay working together to protect the Bay. And so I'm speaking kind of from that perspective as well. So the agenda that I was going to talk through today, and I could talk about this for hours, so I'm going to try to keep it high level and quick, and then happy to entertain any questions. But talk a little bit about the background of nutrients in the Bay. And then the original genesis for this presentation, I think, was what happened with the algal bloom and what are we doing about it. So I'll talk about what we know and a little on what we don't know, and then next steps. So nutrients are of concern in estuaries and water bodies all over the world. In the San Francisco Bay, when I say nutrients, that generally means nitrogen and phosphorus. But when I say nutrients in the San Francisco Bay, we've learned through the scientific studies that nitrogen is a limiting factor. So I may use nitrogen and nutrients kind of interchangeably. We're really not worried about phosphorus here, thankfully. And there are 2 mechanisms that we worry about. So you may have heard the term eutrophication. For example, in the Gulf of Mexico, where you have nutrient enrichment and it kind of chokes out the oxygen in the system and suffocates wildlife. But we also have harmful algal blooms, which is a condition where the algae itself produces a toxin that has its own impact directly on fish and wildlife, in addition to kind of a eutrophication effect. We had in 2022, as I'll talk about, we had a harmful algal bloom that also turned into a eutrophication event, essentially. So these are both conditions that we're concerned with and wanting to prevent. So the inputs of nitrogen to San Francisco Bay have actually been much higher historically than other estuaries. So we pump more nitrogen into San Francisco Bay than goes into the Chesapeake Bay, for example, and other estuaries where they've already had the effects of eutrophication. But historically, San Francisco Bay has been really resilient to those nutrient inputs. And the reason for that are threefold. So one is that the bay is very turbid, it's cloudy. And so the light can't filter through as effectively to grow the algae. Also, we have strong tidal mixing through the Golden Gate, and so that reduces nutrient concentrations. A lot of what we put into the bay pretty much goes straight out the Golden Gate. And then lastly, we've had filter feeding clams that reduce the phytoplankton concentration. So even though we've been sending the bay a lot of nutrients for a long time, we haven't seen impacts until recently. But in the early 2000s, we started to see a concerning trend in the bay that the concentrations of chlorophyll were increasing, and that made us want to start looking closer at these nutrient inputs and what effects they may be having. So why is the wastewater community involved in this? Well, 2/3 of those nitrogen loads to the bay come through wastewater plants. And I say through rather than from, because it's really coming from each of us individually. We are the source. This isn't one of those contaminants where we can look to source control from industry or other product controls. This is really a human problem. And currently most of the wastewater plants around the bay are not designed to remove nutrients or remove nitrogen. So we have 37 wastewater plants that discharge into San Francisco Bay, serving 7.1 million people. They range greatly in the size of the treatment plant and in how much nitrogen comes from each treatment plant, but we've been working collaboratively to study the bay and look for solutions to this problem. So the regional water board regulates each of those wastewater treatment plants through a permit. And rather than what's been done in some states where they saw the first hint of a problem and they just put draconian limits on each wastewater treatment plant, in the San Francisco Bay, we've taken a much more collaborative and science-based approach. So in 2014, our regional water board issued the first watershed permit. So this is a permit that covers all of the wastewater treatment plants together under one permit to regulate nitrogen discharges. Since we didn't know we had a real acute problem back then, that permit really required us to just start looking at it in more detail. So it required monitoring and annual trending. It also required us to contribute financially to the scientific study of the bay. So there's a team from the San Francisco Estuary Institute that has been studying conditions in the bay and how nutrients affect the conditions in the bay. And so that's been paid for largely by the wastewater agencies that represent all of our communities. And then lastly, there was a study that was commissioned that looked at what would it take, meaning what processes would we need to put in place and how much would it cost to upgrade all the treatment plants to remove nutrients to different levels. That permit, these are 5-year permits, so that permit was renewed in 2019. And it largely looked the same. There was some additional monitoring, some additional scientific funding. And another study that I'll touch on briefly, 2 studies actually, one that looks at load reductions via recycled water, and another that looks at nature-based solutions. And I'll talk about the intersection of that with the HASPA work in a little bit. But the idea here is these upgrades are expensive, and wastewater agencies and cities and special districts are facing a variety of challenges all at the same time. We are facing sea level rise and other impacts of climate change, drought, and aging infrastructure. So if we're going to make these big investments in removing nitrogen, let's do it in multi-beneficial ways. Let's do it in ways that we can also augment water supplies or make the shoreline more resilient. So we were on a certain trajectory to reduce nutrients, slowly over time and continue to study the problem. And then we had the game changer, and that was the 2022 algal bloom, which I'm sure you all observed and lamented. And it was something that we on some level anticipated. The species that caused the bloom, and I'll talk about this a little bit, was one of the ones that was on our list that was being studied. But the level of crash of the ecosystem, the level of dissolved oxygen drop, the levels of chlorophyll were beyond even what we had predicted in the studies and the modeling. So this was really a game changer in terms of, wow, we need to do more faster. So the bloom was caused by an organism called Heterosigma akashiwo. It was first observed off the Alameda Oakland estuary in July of 2022. As I mentioned, this was one of 14 species that we had been studying as potential triggers for harmful algal blooms. The species itself had been in the bay, detected in the bay at low levels for decades, but this was the first time we saw a bloom of this magnitude. And so you can see the in these figures kind of the trajectory of the bloom. So it starts out pretty small in the Oakland Alameda estuary and then gradually expands to cover pretty much all of the South Bay.
Not too gradually.
Not too gradually, yeah. Yeah, it happened pretty rapidly between July and the end of August, and then it dissipated. And one of the things that we're still working to understand is, well, what made it go away, right? I mean, we know that that it kind of it ran out of fuel essentially at some point, and so that's one of the keys to preventing and controlling it in the future. So what happened? We had a major harmful algal bloom event. It was the highest phytoplankton biomass levels on record, low oxygen levels throughout the South Bay, and heartbreaking fish mortality. What we know is that the nutrients, the nitrogen inputs didn't change from what's been historical, and so that was unlikely to have been the trigger for the event. And nitrogen didn't cause the event, but they were the fuel. So something else triggered the event. But were there less nitrogen in the system, it might have been smaller in extent and or shorter in duration. Some of the triggers that the scientists are looking at are low suspended sediment concentration. So I mentioned one of the things that's been protecting the bay is all the sediment that washes down, some of it from, you know, historical Central Valley gold mining operations and so forth. And so there's just more sediment, less sediment reaching the bay these days. And so the bay is clearer, which is beautiful, but not good for preventing algae growth. Also, often at this time of year, we're talking July, August, we have a lot of fog over the bay, and that prevents sunlight from reaching the water. And in this particular period of time, we had a stretch of sunny days. Again, wonderful for being outside and enjoying, but not great for the conditions in the bay. And then similarly, we had windows of calm winds. So what we're trying to use this event to understand is what combination of factors led to this happening. And we can't control those factors, right? We're not going to control the wind and the clouds, but at least we can predict the probability of these things coinciding again. We can put into place potential, you know, emergency action measures, and we can, the most important thing is reducing the nitrogen loads that are the fuel for this. In 2023, there was also a small bloom at around the same time of the same organism, but it was less severe. And again, that's another thing we're studying to try to understand, well, why didn't it take off that time in the way it took off in 2022? But what it says at the bottom there is that this, you know, I mentioned this was a game changer politically. Yeah, I don't know how to.
I don't know.
It's okay, I'll just tell you. What it says is that this all led to political and regulatory pressure to do more faster as far as reducing nutrients. So I mentioned that there are 37 wastewater treatment plants around the bay that discharge, and so nutrient reduction really needs to be a regional effort. So this is how they all stack up currently, and these are, you know, moving targets as agencies put projects into place. But East Bay Mud is the largest discharger of nitrogen to the bay during the dry season. San Francisco is second, and then third is East Bay Dischargers Authority, which is us, and that's a combined outfall of 6 wastewater plants. So it functions a little bit differently than the way that these others are counted. But we'll talk about that. Yeah.
I won't be able to remember it at the end, but does this have any relationship to the amount of effluent you discharge?
Yes.
So it's exactly the same, right? The nitrogen.
It's not exactly.
We're not producing more nitrogen in Castro Valley, are we? And putting in your plant, in your statistics, are we? It's just based on flow.
Correct. So it's based on a couple things. It's definitely based on flow and population in particular. It is also how effective a plant is already at removing it. So San Jose is actually one of the biggest plants. They are a lower discharger of nitrogen because the sensitive habitat into which they discharge in the lower South Bay, they've had nitrogen requirements for a long time. So the South Bay dischargers, San Jose, Palo Alto, and Sunnyvale already remove nitrogen. They will probably have to do more, but that's why it's not directly in relation to population or flow. Also, East Bay Mud is not as big as San Francisco or San Jose, but they historically have discharged more nitrogen because they have a program that takes in trucked waste, high strength food waste from the Central Valley, which has been a great environmental story in terms of producing, having a home for that waste to be treated and producing renewable energy from it, but it adds to their nitrogen loads. So they have ceased taking certain types of waste since this came about. So what will it take to reduce all of this nitrogen? This is from that study that I mentioned, and it's been somewhat updated that getting to a low level, what we call level 3 of nitrogen, could cost regionally about 13 billion. So this is not a cheap problem to fix, and that's why we're trying to be really thoughtful about how we do it and how much would be really enough to be protective of the bay. And multi-benefit projects will be critical, as I mentioned. So these are some screenshots from the regional nature-based solutions study that that we did as part of this permit requirement, and the EBDA members and hence the HASPA shoreline has really been a model and at the forefront of demonstrating how multi-benefit projects, nature-based projects can be used to reduce nitrogen. So on the lower right here, you have a very old picture now, but of the Orloma horizontal levee demonstration site, which is where we've been piloting a strategy to have a levee that is gently sloped such that we can put wastewater into the subsurface and that removes nitrogen, while also protecting the shoreline from wave runoff and enhancing habitat, providing upland refuge for species as the bay rises. So this has been a great example of the types of multi-benefit projects that can be employed to address this challenge. So I'm going to flip really quickly through what the agencies that are members of EBDA are doing in terms of being proactive on this effort. So the Orloma Castro Valley wastewater treatment plant implemented a project back in 2020. So before there were any requirements in place, they implemented a nitrogen upgrade to their plant that has already significantly reduced nitrogen loads to the EBDA system and hence the bay. So you can see the effluent total inorganic nitrogen from Orloma is the blue line there that really significantly decreased, and then the red line is the overall EBDA discharge, and so you can see how that contributes to our regional discharge. San Leandro is planning to construct in 2024 a treatment wetland. So again, employing nature-based solutions to treat for nitrogen.
Fresh water.
So it will be fresh water, yeah, they'll be feeding wastewater, a portion of wastewater from the treatment plant into the subsurface, into this pond that they're rehabilitating, and then it'll discharge to the bay kind of next to the Oakland airport. The Hayward Water Pollution Control Plant is in design on a significant upgrade that will add a new biological nitrogen removal process. So this is a big project for the city to upgrade the treatment plant to remove nutrients that is expected to be constructed in finishing in 2028-29. Union Sanitary District is in construction currently on a $457 million upgrade to their treatment plant to remove nutrients and improve performance of the plant overall. They expect a 50% nitrogen reduction from this upgrade. And then there are some future projects that have been identified in the HASPA master plan that will potentially further contribute to the nitrogen reduction, so.
West toward East Street, then turn left on East Street.
Pardon me.
So there's the first mile horizontal levee project, which would be in Oraloma Marsh. This is a project that we are completing 30% design on. And we've applied for additional grant funding to continue the design of that project. That would take some effluent from the Oraloma treatment plant and put it into the subsurface for additional nitrogen removal. And then at Hayward, in addition to the plant upgrade that I talked about, they're looking at potentially rehabilitating a portion of these former oxidation ponds to be a treatment wetland and a horizontal levee along the outward edge of that. So these are projects that are in the master plan and that will also help us meet these nitrogen goals. So we're currently negotiating the third watershed permit. So I mentioned the watershed permit that we operate under now, that expires next year. So we're negotiating the next permit. It will look similar to the last two, but with the addition of actual load caps that we will need to meet. So far, it's all been monitoring and sort of good faith efforts to reduce, and now we're actually going to have limits. And so these projects will help us meet those limits. And that's what I have.
Wow.
Very nice.
You said you made limits on you, how much you can produce?
Right.
When do we get to that limit?
Yeah, good question. So
Can't stop.
one of the challenges is population growth will add to loads at the same time as we're trying to reduce. And so because the agencies were quote unquote early actors, meaning our projects are already underway before the limits kicked into place. The goal is going to be to put limits in that are consistent with what our projects are designed to meet, so that we are protected in our investments. That's still being negotiated, so time will tell. But what the regional water board is saying is basically they they recognize that there will be population growth, but at the same time, the bay doesn't care and the bay can only handle a certain amount. And so if further upgrades are needed, further investments to reduce nitrogen, then that's what will be required. But they are interested in seeing these multi-benefit projects take priority, and they know that those take longer because of the partnerships that are needed to make them happen. So that's the trade-off.
And the technology is there to do, I mean, besides the bio stuff, the technology is there for.
It is. It's expensive, both to construct and to run. It takes more energy. To get to really low levels, it takes chemical addition. But it can be done and is being done in other parts of the world.
Very nice.
It's, appreciate your efforts. Good Lord. So the state government's hell bent on building everything in the world in 5 stories high and every open piece of space, and you're gonna have to treat all of it and discharge it. Great.
I gotta say one hopeful one. I've been to Petaluma. I had
Yeah.
occasion to go up there. They have this water treatment plant near their marsh, and then they made a pond, a freshwater pond, and they have a trail that goes around the pond and goes out into the marsh area as well, which is just a beautiful regional park, you know, for that area. And you really couldn't tell where the treatment plant starts and where the marsh starts and where the water is, and it's full of bird life. It's really wonderful, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure you could do that on the bay because you have salt water and all that, but
That is a great example, and actually, a team from the city of Hayward and I went up to Petaluma to tour their site and talk to their operators, and that is a model of what we're thinking about for Hayward.
really beautiful.
Eric?
Yeah, thank you. Great presentation. You said that about 2/3 of the nitrogen is coming from our wastewater. The other third would be fertilizer or other.
Yeah, it's a combination of just stormwater runoff from around the bay and inputs from the delta, which includes,
Okay.
ag. It also includes the Sacramento wastewater treatment plant, which recently did a $3 billion upgrade to remove nitrogen, so that should help us too.
Eddie,
Yeah, I was wondering if there's any connection between like shifting, working from home habits and where, who's using what facilities versus like, instead of commuting to San Jose and using the big office
Right.
facilities, you're working, like, you stay in Fremont or Hayward or wherever.
Yeah.
And does that have any effects?
It definitely has, Bay-wide, the net has been pretty similar, because, there have been people who've moved out, but also our population.
State population.
Yeah, generally, this is slightly off topic, but wastewater agencies have noticed like a shift in the timing of peak flows, for example. Now that people aren't commuting, they're getting up later and showering later, but yeah, the nitrogen loads haven't changed overall that much.
Because the kind of water volumes happen at a certain time of the year, are you looking at having the same cap for the whole year, or only when the bloom is higher?
Good question, only for the dry season,
Okay.
so the limits that they're talking about putting in place would be May to September.
so when you mentioned the inflow from all the rivers that come into the play a role in keeping the algal levels down, is that based on all the residual or legacy mercury coming down, killing all the algae?
Not so much the mercury, but the sediment.
If there are no further comments, that was fascinating. Thank you so much. I'm depressed now. Yes. And we'll contribute part of that 13 billion, I promise, right here at the HASPA. Sir.
For item 7, can we talk about maybe a concrete outreach plan? Can we agendize that for possibly the next meeting? How do we actually go about reaching, showing up at some of these other agencies that we would like to encourage to join us?
Yes, we're gonna talk about that in item number 9 for agenda setting, but yes, I've heard loud and clear that we looking for a plan that the board can discuss and direct, so we will bring something back. A draft that we've talked about with the TAC. But just about, there's different levels of community outreach, but at this point, what we're talking about is outreach to the agencies who might want to join us.
All right.
Yes, we'll bring something back to February.
Great, fantastic.
I just,
Okay, so does the TAC staff have any updates? Thanks for all your great work. Any board member announcements?
Real quick, so Alameda County Planning is doing a climate action plan, and they're taking comments. Maybe it's closed, but so I called the planner and I said, "You looked at our master plan," because they hadn't mentioned at all sea level rise. And so it was for the unincorporated area, which is mostly Castro Valley and all. I said, it affects San Lorenzo and affects, Orlando area and everything. So anyway, so she said I hadn't seen it, and I sent her a copy, where I referred her to the website. And so I don't know what's gonna happen, but I just that's another thing, because the county acknowledges that it's one more pressure point for the supervisors, so that's another thing to do, is just make sure everyone gets a copy of that master plan.
Thank you. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah.
So, anybody else? Nothing else? East Bay Regional Park District is celebrating their 90th anniversary next year. We've got some hands and calendars. If you would like one, just ask me. I've got plenty.
And ours is gonna do 80 next year.
That's right. So yeah, great ideas, agenda setting for next week or next meeting. Boy, I think that's an excellent idea. I mean, we really started at the Hayward Street Fairs. If we get a traveling roadshow to say what we do, and based on our master plan, and based on our challenges, and based on the good things we do, and based on our opportunities with all the grants coming up, I think we should, go to the mayor's conferences. We should go to everywhere. Roadshows,
board meetings.
yeah, board meetings, and we can do that. If there's anything else for the good of the order, anyone? Happy holidays, everyone. Thank you all.
We've got the sign-in sheet circulating. I didn't mention it at the beginning, but I think most of you signed it, but just be sure to do that.
All right, cool. Thank you all. Here.